Welcome to Suburban Warrior, the podcast that will impact, inspire, and empower you to transform your mindset and become the badass warrior that you are. I'm your host and fellow warrior, Chrissy Pfeiffer, former clinician and corporate marketing exec turned multi-passionate entrepreneur, performance and life coach, and mom to 4 not-so-little warriors. Each week, I will bring you honest conversations with inspiring guests to share their stories of resilience, optimism, success, and simple yet effective strategies so that you transform your thoughts and change your behavior to get the results you want in your life. You will be empowered to take action, warrior up, and believe in you. Let's do this. What's up, warriors? Welcome back to another episode of the Suburban Warrior Podcast. I am your host, Chrissy Pfeiffer, and I am back today with another amazing suburban warrior here to share her story with you today. And as always, I'm really excited about this conversation today because my guest is going to talk to us about all things leadership development. We're going to get into some little heavier topics like forgiveness and vulnerability and how those attributes really help you to become a better leader. So let me introduce to you my guest today, Lisa Marie Platske. She is an award-winning leadership expert in human behavior. Lisa Marie Platske has received accolades from the White House, the United States Small Business Administration, and the International Alliance for Women, recognized as one of the top 100 women making a difference in the world. She left her federal law enforcement career to be the CEO of an international leadership development company, Upside Thinking, Inc. Lisa Marie delivers presentations worldwide, sharing research on how vulnerability and forgiveness are critical to exceptional leadership, as well as her proven 7-step leadership model centered on connection, positioning, and executive presence. An international best-selling author in 5 countries, Lisa Marie has written or co-authored 7 books. A member of the Forbes Coaches Council and a regular contributor to Forbes.com, she has trained or coached over 100,000 leaders around the globe to make a bigger positive impact on the planet since 2005. She lives on Summit Hills Farm in the Bluegrass region of Kentucky, where she runs her online business without internet access, using her hotspot only. Welcome to the podcast, Lisa.
Thank you. Thanks, Chrissy. So excited to be here with you.
I am so excited to hear your story. So thank you for being here. So why don't you first tell us a little bit about, how you got to where you are today, the coach, the award-winning speaker, the best-selling author. I know in your bio, it says that you were in federal law enforcement, but what happened? What was your path to get you here today?
Well, Chrissy, I never thought I would be here. Some people have a real clear plan and they go, yep, like I'm going to write a book and I'm going to have a business and I'm going to do whatever, because it's the thing that's been nudging. And that wasn't me. I loved my life as in federal law enforcement. After college, I had majored in criminal justice. And so for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to go into law enforcement. Like that was a clear decision that I wanted. And so after waiting for several years and working in banking, when I got into the government, it was like, this is going to be the thing for me. And in the government, I had an opportunity to come face to face with who I was, as much as owning a business is a personal development journey. And perhaps you understand,
Yes.
Being in the government was also that for me, because I worked primarily with men who, as somebody who had long blonde hair and red, white, and blue nails, I didn't exactly fit in. And so there was this rub for some of the guys, and I had to really come face to face with who I was. I had a lot of unresolved trauma that I didn't realize that had me be perhaps even, I guess one of the things I could say is off-putting, very hard shell, very strong exterior. And if fight or flight were a choice, I was going to fight you. And, I was going to do whatever I could to take you out. And all of that came from a place of real tenderness. Like I loved people on the inside. I just was so scared to get hurt, so that I had to wrestle with all of that and figure that out. So when it came to the opportunity to open a business, I was in a relationship with a guy and we lived in different states. So I was living in the New York metropolitan area and working, and he was in the DC area. And then I took a job at but it was an assignment at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Georgia. And then he took one in California and I took one in Texas. And if you know anything about geography, you know we weren't getting closer to each other. And so it was the perfect relationship for me where, every 3 weeks or so we could get together. And when my then boyfriend proposed, it was really somewhat a surprise in that when we started the relationship, he said, I don't want anything serious. And I said, good, I don't want anything serious. And here we were a year down the road and he's asking me to marry him. And I am thinking that I'm going to keep working in the government and doing my thing and me being me and seeing each other every 3 weeks. And friends of mine were like, usually like when you get married, you live together. Like that's kind of how it works.
Right.
So that was what took me to I stood at a crossroads and said, all right, what are you going to do? And I couldn't reconcile having the personal values and the desire to have a marriage that would be successful after being somebody who grew up with 6 sets of step parents and all too well was familiar with the world of divorce and how that was never good for anybody, that I really was like, how do I do this with 2 competing careers? And so I made the decision to quit. And it was a hard decision because if you've ever gone through any transition in life, you understand that transitioning and taking a decision, no matter what it is, you don't get a written guarantee. Everything in life is a bit of a leap of faith. And so my dad was concerned. He sent me a check to like, oh my gosh, how can we go from 6 figures to no figures? How is this going to work out for her? Now you're relying on a man. How is this going to work for you? Like it was just after all of the things that I did to set myself up. And the reality is I didn't know all the things that I would get into in the business. And I made a boatload of mistakes. And my greater commitment was I knew that the work that I did in the government, which is the same work that I do today in leadership, was about transforming lives through ideas, thoughts, and beliefs for people who wanted to make a bigger positive difference in the world. And so I believe that you can do that in any profession.
Yeah.
And for me, it's just that leadership is the one that came to me. I was interested in helping people be able to influence others and have a greater impact. It's why I got into law enforcement, and it's why I opened up my leadership evolution company.
Wow, that's really a great story. And, so many things that you said during that are just very poignant to me. Just, how when you have to take a leap of faith sometimes in life, when you make a transition, right? I think everybody goes through those times in their lives when they're faced with, making a pretty tough decision for whatever it may be, whether it's career or personal. And, you can't be stagnant. You have to move forward. You have to make the decision, right? So taking that leap of faith and doing what you believe is best. And I also found it very funny because even your energy, talking to you prior to us starting to record and the energy that I feel from you now, like to think that you were this like fight, when you said fight or flight, I was ready to fight. I think that seems so different than who you are right now. So obviously it's been such a evolution of life for you because you don't, I can, just from your energy now, I don't feel that from you. So, okay. So then tell us, I know you've started your leadership evolution company in 2005. So it's been a long time and you've been very successful. So tell us a little bit about, what it is that you do. What is probably like one of the first things that you do with your company as far as like helping people to, like you said, transform their lives through beliefs, ideas, all that sort of thing?
Well, I have to go back a bit because it's been an evolution. And I'm so glad that you recognize that about me. So thank you so much, Chrissy. This has been the journey for me, in that the person that I was then and people who knew me then, I'm not that person today. And so it's the same thing with my business. In 2005, I came at the company from 14 modules of leadership. Go into places and do training. Modules were on mission, values, and vision, and hiring and scaling and performance management and change management and how to deal with difficult people. And there was this body of work that I had created through my experiences in law enforcement, taking both the failures and the successes and putting them together with some great books and research. And what I realized was I didn't understand enough about business. My background was in criminal justice. I had a master's degree in human resources. So I didn't have that business acumen that some people have when they open up a business or they've come from their MBA. So for me, what I started to do was interviewing people in business. And I interviewed people who were considered to be successful. And I was like, what are the themes? Like, what are the things that, if you could pack a business suitcase, that are the things that you needed? And there were 7 themes that came up for me. And they're what I call my 7 pillars of leadership. It's every single person had some iteration of this. And I just put it in a framework that was designed for me to have a shortcut, because I didn't have that kind of a background. And why all of this is important is because, Chrissy, I still had this mindset that leadership was far more tactical. Like, if you do these things, you'll lead well. I'm somebody who likes to have, tell me what the formula is. Tell me how I can do this, and I can, to be able to get to the end result.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll put in the work. I'll hustle. I'll get it done. And along the journey, what happened for me was, in the government, I was in 9/11. I was working in New York, and I lost my mentor, and I had to send my employees out looking for human remains. And it was a really hard time. And I got to the point where I recognized that if I didn't learn how to forgive, I was going to be a really angry person. And it's what also allowed me to see some of the other traumas that I had experienced. And nobody gets through life without some form of suffering. Doesn't matter who they are. It's not necessarily what's front facing. And so what I started to see with these leaders, as much as I had all of those modules and the leadership coaching, which didn't start early on, I get people who'd ask me for coaching, and the corporate retreats, and I had this annual conference I've done for 16 years. As much as I had all of those other things, what I recognized is when somebody was stuck, it wasn't because all of that research wasn't good. It was because there was something in them, in the version of the person of who they needed to be, that in the past was getting in the way from them doing that. And so for me, I could see that those pains that I had from being a little girl and from experiencing 9/11 and some of the other things affected me in a way that didn't allow me to fully show up as the person who deep down wanted to love other people. And I recognized that some of these leaders were experiencing the same thing. And so my body of work took on a very, very different place that I never thought that it would, because, and it's interesting that you asked me this, Chrissy, and I have no idea why I'm saying it. It's the first time that I've ever said it, perhaps out loud. And it's the first time that just in your questioning, your body of how you've questioned or where we've gone, where the conversation has gone, that I recognize that there's an element of work in which I am in this leadership work with vulnerability and forgiveness that's really around trauma.
Yeah.
So, when I get the person who's an executive and they say, my child is cutting themselves, or my wife and now ex-wife is hitting me, I go home and I am unable to go to sleep without a six-pack. I never thought that those were things that were, it's not like a marketing or anything like that. For me, it's here's the tactical elements of leadership. Here's what you do. But there is this human element where we all experience suffering. And it's become such a big part of my work, where the blending of the experience and the humanity. And I feel like that's really what leadership is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I see that. I think the way that you explained it was very eloquent. And because I also think we've evolved as a society, from the early 2000s till now. When you think about the evolution of the last 20 years of, I had a corporate coach, in the 2000s, or an executive coach. And that was really what made me want to become a coach myself, because I was, a director of marketing in a pharmaceutical company with lots of responsibilities and teams, and, working with my executive coach. So it's very much goal setting and leadership development and how to lead a team and what do I want to do to get to the next level. And it was very corporate. And I ended up leaving that corporate job to become a coach, because so many of the things that I was working on with her, I thought I was very good with doing with my team as well. And people have heard it already, why I left that to become a coach. But in my coaching has evolved so much too, because it is more about I don't want to just say energy, but like the emotion, right? And yes, there's traumas, but, understanding yourself before you can really, and how to, what I say is have self-leadership, right? Be self-aware, understand yourself before you can lead others. And in that, it is about talking about everything, right? There's no just coaching the career. There is, not just coaching the family life. When you look at your life, it's a whole. And I feel like we've evolved to really understand that you have to be able to be vulnerable and be willing to kind of look within and understand yourself before you can really empathize and lead and understand others. And I kind of feel like that's, what you're saying and I love the idea of vulnerability and forgiveness, because that is really, those are two huge topics that we could literally just talk about one of them and still be here for hours. But because the vulnerability and forgiveness, they tie into every single aspect of our lives as human beings, right?
They do. And that's the part where how the other piece for me is that when I had my business and it was like, well, people need to see somebody as successful, right? And so what is successful? Well, successful is you don't make mistakes, right? Like this is, and my marketing director's like, Lisa, we need your marketing to be more we need you to be more vulnerable. And this is, I don't know, 15 or so years ago. And I'm like,
right.
You need me to be more vulnerable. Like what are you like, it was a slightly annoying, slightly frustrating, just, okay. So you want me to write more? And through that process of me finding me, my business has opened up to a completely different clientele and a completely different body of work, to where I had a client on Saturday morning say, I just realized that because it was the reason Saturday morning was, I had a retreat the week before in Estes Park, Colorado. And these 5 leaders that came together, there was a follow-up phone call. And they had awarenesses of leaving the retreat and coming back into the world and going like, wow, there's a really big gap between like the work I've done and where many humans are, both in my business that I, as the CEO, that I'm responsible for, but also just in the collective of like at the airport and, navigating life. And what this gentleman said was, I didn't realize how many people don't really like themselves. And this week it's been very apparent. And when he said it, it didn't come from a place of judgment. It came from a real place of tenderness and compassion, right, to recognize that whatever is in me is a reflection. And so if I am intolerant, or if I am frustrated, or if I am belittling or whatever, there is something in me that I'm not happy with that is translating into how I lead others. And so as this conversation, went on, it was beautiful to watch the aha of, yes, leading self comes first. And unless you get to that place where you and when I was hearing you talk, I was like, yeah, Chrissy, lots of people say that, and yet they don't know. I didn't understand that. People say be yourself. It's like, what the heck? What does that mean? Yeah. So, and the reality is that's what, there is a process to that. It is not a 24-hour process or a self-help book. There are, I want to say this was probably 13 years ago when I was meeting with somebody who was a mentor. I'd hired somebody as a spiritual mentor, and we were talking about something, and she said, that's because of self-loathing. And I said, I don't loathe myself. And she's like, and did this sort of shoulder shrug. And I was like, what is she seeing that I'm seeing? And that level of forgiveness and tenderness and compassion for me, unless I have that, being vulnerable is really hard.
Yeah. And just to piggyback on what you just said about, it being a process, like, don't you think that, like, when you first start getting into the world of, whether you want to call it personal development, leadership development, when you start scratching the surface of that, you realize that you just scratched the surface, and then you're just, at the deeper that you go into it, at least I feel like, listen, I've been a very intuitive and introspective person, I think, my whole life, but I've been a coach for the last 13 years. I've always been into personal development. Really, ever since my teens, I was reading like spiritual books and books on meditation. Mm-hmm. So it's always been and it's always been an interest for me. But, I think I really got real serious about it when it started to become my career. But I still am like, I feel like I know so much, and there's so much I just don't know, because as you get deeper into it, you just realize that there's so many layers. And it is real work, it's work that you have to look at and figure out and work on a little bit each day. It's understanding yourself, understanding those around you. It's shifting your perspective. It's changing your mindset. It's, being able to flip the script, on your thoughts pretty quickly when negative patterns start to come up. And so it's all those things, but that takes so much time to figure out, right?
Well, I'm so glad that you understand this, from a very visceral and tangible, your experience and your life, because that's it. It's like when as somebody who's intuitive, and I've heard the voice of the Holy Spirit since I was a little kid. And there's been times in my life where I've turned it off, and I've, kind of muscled through and said, I'm going to do things my way, which never works out as well, I will just say. What I have recognized for me is that there isn't a final destination. There's just the evolution. And even when I say, oh yeah, I think I've handled that, or I think I've dealt with that, there's a new iteration and a new awareness. And so I like, once again, I like to have, what does that actually mean for me? And I have a course that I teach on how to access the divine operating system, how to bring God into your business. And what I tell people is, it's really more about giving yourself the quiet, the space, and then trusting. So early on, when I didn't understand how to do that, I have an acronym called SNAP, SNAP, and it's stop, notice, ask a question, and then pause, pray, or pivot. And so when I'm in the day and things are really busy, because they're often really busy and there's a lot of things, especially, it doesn't matter whether you're in corporate or whether you stay at home, whether you homeschool kids, whether you've got a business, it doesn't matter. Life in general is just overfull with so much, just so much for anyone, that for me to train myself to stop and notice and ask, like, what am I feeling? What's going on? And then do one of those three or all three sometimes, pause, pray, and pivot. It really allowed me to put something tangible to the experience, because I had heard people say, oh yeah, like you just do the inner work. And it's like, no, what the heck is the inner, like, tell me what this is. And so, and then I hear people talk about self-love, which to some degree is really annoying, because it's not about a massage or a bubble bath. Like, it's really reflecting on what is it that I really believe? Not that somebody told me I should believe about the definition of success or what I should want or what I should have. But in order for me to lead others, I have to innately understand me. But in order for me to understand me, I have to spend as much time or value my time with me as much as I value with other people. And so when schedules are overfull, for most people, and especially women, there isn't time to actually listen or to go, what is it that I want? Do I even know? Have I ever asked myself that question? Do I even understand how I feel? Or am I just on to the next task? And so this past weekend, I had a woman who has been doing transformational work, personal development work for many, many years, for 30 some years. And she said, I got in those 2 days with you, I got 10 years. Like, I've never in 30 years gotten that much. But it wasn't me, it was the willingness to be in the conversation. I mean, yes, it was me in the sense that I am a really masterful facilitator, and you still have to show up and be willing to be in the quiet, be in the spaciousness, trust that even if the answer comes up and it's like, this is something you think you've dealt with a million times, are you willing to look at it with fresh eyes? And I have to do that for myself throughout the course of the day, just on a Thursday, because, and I don't have to, I choose to, because of what I want from it. And I lead my team better because of it. And they say the same thing, which is, you're different. Yeah, I'm different every single day because I'm doing the work.
Yeah, because of the growth from the work, right? Every day, it's like little tiny snippets of growth that happen every day. But I love SNAP. I love that. I love the acronym around it, because I think stopping, I think that, to your point about every day, like, I think that's something that is an acronym that you can be using so many times throughout your day. I mean, whether you're like getting frustrated because someone in front of you is driving crazy or super slow, or, somebody pissed you off in the supermarket, or, your kids are crazy, or your husband, like, whatever it is, a friend did something that hurt you, like, whatever it may be, really, when those emotions start to come up, the ability to stop, notice them. First of all, just those first two are revolutionary, especially if you don't do that on a regular basis. And then ask. Like, I find myself doing this. The older I get, I'm so much better at it, but asking myself, why am I feeling this way? Why am I frustrated? Why am I angry? Why am I being short? Right? Like, why am I snapping at my kids? Snapping. That's funny. But then to ask and really maybe try to uncover what the answer that is, because to your point earlier, most of the time, what you're upset or frustrated about isn't anything to do with what you think you're frustrated about. It's something deeper within ourselves. It could be literally back to, like, the way that my parents parented me. And so now I'm trying to parent that same way, but it doesn't feel right to me. Like, there's silly things but that aren't really silly, because they're like deep, innate really like not really traumas, but they're just coded in us and whatever. And then I love the pray, pause, or pivot based on sort of when you ask that question, what you feel is the most appropriate. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's a really awesome piece of quote unquote tactical advice that people can use in their everyday to really help change their thoughts on an immediate basis.
Thank you. Well, it's been helpful for me because asking myself, I'm like, that doesn't feel like me. Why am I? What is this? And then it's like, for me, I have 7 areas that I go through. Like, is it physical? Is it emotional? Is it intellectual? Is it financial? Is it spiritual? Is it relational? Is it in my work? Like, what is this going on? And sometimes, quite frankly, it's like you haven't had water. It's something like a basic thing. And sometimes it's like you say, it's something that somebody said that landed in a way, and it's like, oh, that's old. That's like not present Lisa Marie. What is that? It just gives me an ability to have a very quick check-in, and that's the self-leadership piece. That's our responsibility.
Yeah.
Especially if we're going to bring other people in.
Right. Exactly. And do you find that when you ask yourself those questions, like when you just talked about those categories, are you able to pinpoint if it's like emotional, physical, financial? Like, do you find, and can it be more than one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it can be more than one. And yes. And I had something the other day where I was like, what is, like, I have a really strange feeling in my body, and like, what is this? And I kind of went down my list, and then I was like, oh, I understand what this is. I had gotten an email from someone, and their spouse is not a raving fan of mine. And how the email was written had tentacles of what that person had said. And it was just this, it brought up stuff where I kind of could feel myself defending. And I was like, oh, this is in like 3 different categories, and it's really not mine. And so I was able to let it go then. It was just, this is multiple things here. This is emotional. This is relational. This is financial.
Right.
And this is not mine.
Yeah. And that's another thing. I think being able to get to a point of this is not mine takes a little while to get to, right? To learn that, that again, I think that's part of the journey, part of coaching, part of personal development. Like, this is not mine to carry. And, for me, I do return to sender, like whatever, right? Whatever they were projecting, I'm just going to package that back up and send it right back to you.
I like return to sender. I do spiritual recycling center. I'm like,
love it.
And I'm recycling it, and you can return it back to whomever it belongs to. I don't know who it is. I don't know if it was the person at the grocery store, because sometimes it's not clear. It's just,
of course.
I just know it's not mine.
It's not mine. Return to sender. And the other thing is, I think this is great. Just as you were talking about that experience, there are some days where we can't pinpoint how we feel, right? Sometimes I'll just talk to friends and, or I have clients that are just, I just feel so low today. Or, when you're sort of in that state of depression, not clinically depressed, but like, what I'm saying? Like, when you just are feeling low, you're feeling depressed, you feel like I don't have the energy to do much today. And that doesn't feel good. And I think sort of asking those questions at those times of low energy, doing the SNAP at those times of low energy might be able to help you identify some of those causes, because the quicker that I love that I'm saying SNAP, the quicker that we can snap out of that sort of a low energy or depressed mood, the better, because the more you hang out there, the more then you feel like almost guilty for being there, or you're sad about being there. And then it's just like this sort of cycle that you get into, and day after day, you're feeling like crap for a week. So, that SNAP is a great suggestion for when you're getting into that space of not feeling like yourself and not really knowing why, and being able to reflect on that.
And that's exactly it, is that I will ask myself, is this mine? Whose is this? And I'm like, that's not mine. And so even as I was at my retreat, I recognized that the energy of the clients, it was nothing negative, just they're there to be able to look at their work and look at the things that have been holding them back in the past that could be getting in the way of them having an amazing third and fourth quarter. So as we're looking at that means that we're looking at stuff that's uncomfortable and unpleasant and maybe not even things that they're unaware of. So it's almost in this, this unconscious energy field. And so I woke up one of the days and I'm like, I don't feel so good. And I'm like, is this mine? And I'm like, I got a real visceral sense in my body. No, it's not. And it's just in this space. So let me go out for a walk. And what I find is that when I take a God walk and I just take a walk and just move the body, even when I don't feel like it, number one, it moves energy. So physiologically, it's good for the cells. Yeah. And number two, it allows the activation of the three brains, not just the thinking mind, but also the heart brain and the gut brain. And so in that, it also allows for cleansing and clearing. And, all of that, like I say, is physiological. That's not, that's not woo-woo. That's science.
It's not spiritual. It's science. Yeah.
Right.
Move your body. Mm-hmm.
So that helps tremendous to allow for the shift to take place.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. I love what you do. I love your energy. And I love that you were able to share some really amazing tidbits of advice that people can start using right now. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a great interview and just for being in the dialogue of it all. Because what I appreciated is the fact that you're like me, willing to go, like, where are we going to go? Let's see, what's going to be revealed. This will be exciting.
Exactly. Like you said, whatever was said today is what was meant to be said.
Yep.
And so thank you so much for being here. I will link your website. Where can people find you on social?
My personal page is Lisa Marie Platske, Platske, on Facebook, and I'm on LinkedIn. And
awesome.
Yeah,
that's great. Well, thank you so much. We will make sure that we link all this great information in the show notes so people can know where to find you and learn more about your retreats and about your coaching. So thank you so much for being here today. I will be back next week with another awesome suburban warrior story another suburban warrior here to share her story. Thanks so much for joining me, guys, and I'll talk to you next week.